Winter, Warsaw, February 1943. The streets are quieter than they should be. Snow collects along tram tracks that no longer run on time. German patrol boots echo between buildings stripped of color and warmth. On one corner, a municipal bus idles longer than usual, its windows fogged by the breath of passengers who speak only in whispers. Inside, children sit unusually still. Coats too thin. Shoes mismatched. Eyes trained downward, as if eye contact itself could be dangerous. Beside them sits a Polish social worker carrying official papers stamped by German authorities, documents that allow her to move between worlds no civilian should cross. Beyond the walls nearby, thousands are being prepared for deportation. Trains move daily. Names disappear faster than records can track them. But in hidden corners of the city, another system is forming. Quiet. Fragile. Illegal. Human. In the coming months, that system will move children out of death's path one by one, using methods that must remain invisible to survive. And to understand how that became possible, we have to step back to the moment Europe itself began to collapse, September 1st, 1939. The world watched as German forces crossed into Poland, their tanks rolling over a nation unprepared for the precision and speed of the blitzkrieg. Warsaw, the capital, became the heart of the struggle, its streets scarred by bomb craters, its buildings bearing the first marks of occupation. By 1940, the German administration had begun the systematic isolation of Jewish populations. The Warsaw Ghetto was established, one of the largest ghettos in Europe. Barbed wire walls stretched over 3 square miles, enclosing over 400,000 people. Within, disease, starvation, and overcrowding became constant threats. Every day was measured by the availability of bread, the risk of inspection by Nazi patrols, and the desperate need to preserve dignity amidst despair. The Germans imposed strict control over all movement. Health inspections, registration offices, and municipal records were meticulously maintained. While these systems were meant to monitor and suppress, they inadvertently became points of leverage for those willing to resist. Social workers, nurses, and municipal employees navigated between official duties and clandestine operations. One such network emerged in the shadows, a council of aid workers determined to protect life under conditions that made survival a daily miracle. For Jewish families in Warsaw, each day brought the uncertainty of deportation. The trains to Treblinka and other extermination sites ran on a relentless schedule. Notices, lists, and identification papers dictated who would survive long enough to see another sunrise. Yet even in the coldest calculations of death, acts of courage and defiance quietly persisted. Human life became both fragile and fiercely protected in the narrow spaces where official oversight could not reach. This backdrop, a city under occupation, a ghetto sealed off, a bureaucracy that monitored everything, would become the stage upon which extraordinary rescue efforts would unfold. To understand the risks and the ingenuity involved, we must first explore how the extermination phase escalated and how underground resistance began to take form. By mid-1942, the situation in Warsaw had grown catastrophic. Operation Reinhard, the code name for the Nazis' plan to systematically murder the Jews of occupied Poland, was in full force. Deportation lists were drawn, trains scheduled, and the logistics of death executed with terrifying efficiency. Treblinka, located 70 miles northeast of Warsaw, became the primary destination for these transports. Few who arrived would ever return. Families were separated at the ghetto gates, children torn from parents' arms, and adults sent to forced labor or directly to gas chambers. It was within this climate of fear that underground networks began to take shape. The Polish Underground State, a clandestine civilian and military organization, coordinated resistance, intelligence, and humanitarian operations. Among its branches was Zagota, the Council to Aid Jews. Formed in late 1942, Zagota's mission was singular, to save as many Jewish lives as possible. They provided forged identity papers, found safe houses, and organized escape routes. Every act of aid was illegal, and every movement carried the risk of death, not only for the rescuer but also for those harboring escapees. Within the Warsaw Ghetto, social workers and municipal employees held unique positions. Their access to health records, municipal documents, and official passes allowed them to move with a limited degree of authority. Some used these channels to extract children from the ghetto under the guise of medical visits or work assignments. Others collaborated with priests, nuns, and sympathetic families outside the walls to place children in safe care. Each transfer required meticulous planning, secrecy, and courage. One misstep could unravel the entire operation, leading to arrest or execution by the Gestapo. The moral stakes were immense. Rescuers were constantly confronted with impossible choices: whom to save, when to act, and how to shield children from the knowledge of imminent death while simultaneously preparing them for survival outside the ghetto. Documentation of identities, often hidden in jars or buried underground, became as vital as the children themselves. Survival depended as much on ingenuity and discretion as it did on sheer courage. In this crucible, ordinary citizens transformed into clandestine heroes. It was here, amid barbed wire and starvation, that Irena Sendler would emerge, orchestrating one of the most extraordinary rescue operations of the war. Her efforts would combine daring, meticulous planning, and relentless humanity, a lifeline that would preserve the futures of 2,500 children. By 1942, the situation in Warsaw was becoming desperate. Deportations to Treblinka were relentless, and the ghetto was shrinking daily under the Nazis' systematic extermination plan. Within these walls, children were the most vulnerable. They could not work, could not hide, and their families were torn apart without warning. Each day, the shadow of death grew longer. Irena Sendler, a 29-year-old social worker in the Warsaw Municipal Health Department, understood the stakes. Her access to official records and health passes allowed her to move in and out of the ghetto, but every trip carried the possibility of arrest or execution. She began quietly rescuing children, one by one, often separating them from their parents without warning. Each child was assigned a new identity, complete with forged papers and a fabricated backstory. The methods were as inventive as they were dangerous. Children were smuggled through the ghetto gates in toolboxes, under carts, and even through underground tunnels. Sometimes, they were hidden in ambulances, appearing as sick patients being transported for treatment. Irena worked with a network of priests, nuns, and sympathetic families, ensuring that each child had a safe destination. Every handoff had to be precise. Any mistake could expose the entire network. One particularly tense operation occurred in late 1942. German officers were conducting random inspections of health department personnel. Sendler, carrying a small child in a basket disguised as medical supplies, was stopped at a checkpoint. She remained calm, showing official documents and explaining the child's medical condition. The officer, satisfied with the papers, waved her through. That moment, a mixture of fear and composure, was repeated countless times, each encounter a brush with death. Despite the constant risk, Sendler's operations continued. Records of the children's real identities were kept meticulously, hidden in jars buried in the gardens of trusted associates. These records would prove vital after the war, allowing many children to reunite with surviving family members. These decisive actions marked the turning point of Sendler's mission, from individual rescues to a coordinated, life-saving network. Her courage and ingenuity would carry 2,500 children through the deadliest year of the Holocaust, preserving a generation that the Nazis sought to erase. In 1943, the Gestapo closed in. The growing number of rescued children and the meticulous records hidden underground had not gone unnoticed. On October 20th, Irena Sendler was arrested in Warsaw, betrayed by an informant. She was taken to the Gestapo headquarters, her small frame dwarfed by the cold, gray walls where countless prisoners had disappeared before her. The interrogations were relentless. Sendler was tortured repeatedly, her wrists broken, her body bruised, yet she refused to betray a single child or the identities of her collaborators. The Gestapo sought names, locations, and methods, but all they found were silence and calculated defiance. Her bravery shielded the lives of thousands. Those who worked with her continued their mission in secrecy, undeterred by her capture. Even as Warsaw burned and deportations intensified, the network remained intact. Sendler's hidden jars, over 2,500 containers holding names, birth dates, and locations, were never discovered. Each jar was a lifeline, a meticulously maintained record that would later allow surviving children to be reunited with relatives or placed safely in new families. The rescue operation's resilience under extreme pressure exemplified both strategic planning and human courage. Meanwhile, Sendler's arrest galvanized the underground network. Colleagues intensified their efforts, using the lessons of her capture to improve security measures. Safe houses were moved, routes were altered, and new identities were forged with even greater care. Every child smuggled past checkpoints, every life preserved, became a testament to the coordination and quiet heroism of the Polish resistance. By the time she was released from prison, reportedly with the assistance of bribes arranged by her contacts, the operation had expanded beyond her direct supervision. Children continued to flow through the network. Irena herself returned to the streets of Warsaw, walking past barbed wire and German patrols, resuming her work with the same meticulous care as before her arrest. Her courage had not only preserved lives but had strengthened the entire network's resolve. This turning point, the moment where risk, arrest, and torture collided with ingenuity, secrecy, and relentless human compassion, defined the success of the operation. It transformed the rescue of children from isolated acts of courage into a coordinated, life-saving mission that would endure through the darkest months of the Holocaust. The survival of this network set the stage for the post-war recovery of these children, their identities, and the memory of the people who refused to let them vanish. From this climax of peril emerges the story of consequence, reconstruction, and the broader impact of Sendler's heroism. By the end of 1944, Warsaw lay in ruins. The ghetto had been systematically destroyed, first during the mass deportations to Treblinka and later in the 1943 Warsaw Ghetto uprising, when the Nazis razed what remained of the Jewish quarter. Streets were littered with rubble, buildings burned to skeletal frames, and the air was thick with the acrid smoke of a city attempting to breathe after a relentless campaign of annihilation. It was a landscape of devastation that seemed to confirm the Nazis' plan, a city emptied of its Jewish population, a generation threatened with erasure. Yet, amid the ashes, Sendler's hidden efforts left a crucial mark. The children she and her network had saved began to emerge as survivors. Their new identities, carefully documented in jars and buried records, allowed them to reconnect with any remaining family members or be placed into new households.
These meticulous records, sometimes smuggled through dangerous channels or preserved by sympathetic neighbors, became the key to reconstructing shattered lives. For many children, the difference between life and death was the careful maintenance of a name, a date, a paper, or a hidden note. The psychological toll on these children cannot be overstated. Many had been separated from parents at an early age, often without understanding why. They faced the trauma of forced assimilation, the fear of discovery, and the constant pressure to adapt to new identities while retaining fragments of their past. Social workers and guardians who had risked their lives for them now became mentors and protectors, guiding them through the precarious transition from clandestine survival to post-war reality. Irena Sendler herself faced a complex aftermath. Though the immediate danger of Gestapo detection had passed, Poland was rapidly changing under Soviet influence. Political instability made recognition for her deeds difficult. Many survivors, absorbed into new families or displaced across Europe, carried fragments of their stories with them, often unable to trace the full scope of Sendler's heroism. It was only in later decades that historical records, personal testimonies, and journalistic investigations would reveal the scale of her work. 2,500 children rescued from almost certain death. The operation's survival also highlighted the resilience and ingenuity of the underground networks. Nagoda, the Polish Council to Aid Jews, had functioned not merely as a bureaucratic entity, but as a living, adaptable organism, capable of responding to extreme risk with precise coordination. The immediate aftermath of Sendler's mission extended beyond survival. Each rescued child represented a seed of continuity in a culture the Nazis sought to erase. Her work preserved not only lives but identities, stories, and the potential for future generations to bear witness. The preservation of names in jars, silent archives of defiance, became symbolic of the broader struggle, the determination to keep human memory intact against systematic attempts at erasure. The resilience of the network, the survival of the children, and the eventual rediscovery of Sendler's story all underscored a profound truth. Even in the midst of industrialized death, individual courage, careful planning, and unwavering moral commitment could bend the arc of fate. This foundation would allow us to trace the longer-term consequences of her work, the restoration of families, and the recognition of heroism that transcended immediate survival. With the fall of Nazi Germany in May 1945, the scale of destruction across Europe became painfully clear. Warsaw, once a vibrant city, had been reduced to rubble. Yet, among the ruins, the traces of resistance and courage persisted. The children saved by Irena Sendler and her network slowly began to emerge into a world they scarcely recognized. Many were reunited with surviving relatives, though countless others had no living family to return to. In each case, the hidden records preserved by Sendler, buried jars containing real names, birth dates, and family connections, became indispensable. These records were recovered over time, allowing children to reclaim their identities or at least learn the truths of their origins. The sheer scale of the operation astounded observers. By some estimates, Sendler directly facilitated the survival of 2,500 children. Each transfer had required careful planning, forged papers, disguises, and coordination with safe houses across Warsaw and beyond. Every child rescued was a small victory against the Nazis' systematic attempt to annihilate a people. The psychological and logistical challenges were immense, yet the success of this operation demonstrated how human ingenuity and courage could outmaneuver even the most oppressive regimes. History often remembers wars in terms of battles won and lost, of cities conquered or destroyed, of empires rising and falling. Yet, amid the machinery of destruction, there are acts that define the moral heart of humanity. Irena Sendler's work stands as one such testament. In the shadow of the Holocaust, she chose courage over compliance, action over despair. Each child she saved represented not only life preserved but hope restored in a world that had systematically sought to extinguish it. Her methods, hiding children in carts, ambulances, or other unlikely places, recording their identities in buried jars, were as inventive as they were dangerous. They reflect a profound understanding of both human behavior and bureaucratic systems, showing how knowledge, creativity, and moral conviction can intersect to protect the vulnerable. Sendler's courage was not a momentary spark. It was a sustained, meticulous effort carried out under the constant threat of death. In a broader sense, Sendler's story challenges how we understand heroism. It is quiet, unassuming, and yet transformative. It reminds us that in times of moral collapse, the choices of one person, guided by principle, empathy, and courage, can shift the course of countless lives. Her legacy is not merely a historical footnote, it is a guidepost for conscience in any era of oppression. And so, in the silent streets of Warsaw, in the hidden jars beneath gardens, in the lives of the thousands who survived, Irena Sendler's story endures. It is a narrative of resilience, humanity, and the enduring power of individual courage, a reminder that even in the darkest chapters of history, the human spirit can protect, preserve, and illuminate a path forward.